Hi class, welcome to my channel. So this is actually my channel. I'm using this to upload my videos in our class. So since I don't have a TLC yet, I'm going to upload this in my channel. So credits to Trinity University of Asia and also for Sir Romel for these slides. Okay, so right now we are going to talk about culture and communication too. So in our previous class, I was able to discuss Culture and Communication 1, wherein I emphasized the importance of language as a form of a verbal communication, and also the importance of nonverbal cues. So right now in here, we're going to discuss a different aspect of culture and how we acquire it, and also the second part of communication. All right. So that is the title of our lesson today is Culture and Communication too. All right. So culture is something that is learned and transmitted. So in our previous class, I've also mentioned this already that culture is something that we acquired with our parents. Again, like what I've mentioned, is that our parents came from different culture, given that they came from different families and different backgrounds. So when we were growing up, we tend to learn their culture together. Okay, so it is something that we learn while we grow up, the mixed culture from our parents. So again, culture is learned and passed on either through generations or in younger organizational cultures through the years. So like what I've mentioned, is that it is passed on generations to generations. So it can change, and some of us may adjust the things that we wanted to practice. Depends on how we perceive the culture that we have. Okay, so again, it is something that is learned and passed on to the next generation. All right. Okay, so culture is, excuse me, culture can be seen in cultural sayings or proverbs, art, and mass media. So like what in my okay, like for example, or in what I've mentioned in my previous class is that some of us are engaging in social media. Some of us are engaging in Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or any other social medias that we tend to visit every day. So this social media actually has an influence to the culture and to the culture that we practice. Like what I've mentioned in our previous class also is that culture is actually as a way of life. So it is something that we do every day. So since we are engaged in a social media platform, we tend to acquire some of their culture and actually practice it. Okay, so some of us go to social media, some of us goes to books, some of us read books, self-help books, and also um, practice those kinds of learnings that we've learned from those books and also from the social media. Let me give you an example. So I hope you're familiar with the movie One More Chance by Bea Alonzo and John Lloyd Cruz. So as you can see there, the reason why Bea Alonzo wanted to break up with John Lloyd Cruz is that she wanted independence from John Lloyd Cruz. So with that movie, actually, a lot of women now tends to think that they also wanted, excuse me, an independence from their partners. So just watching that movie, you can actually get some beliefs and values as well. So like what I've mentioned, culture is our beliefs, values, and yeah, and the way of life, right? So since some of us actually admire that movie that much, we even actually live the practices and beliefs in that movie as well. So as you can see, in simple terms, we cannot just only learn our culture, not just in our family. We can also learn culture in from different perspectives. I mean, in different aspects like social media, movies that we can watch, books that we can read, and many more. Also, like what I mentioned a while ago, initially we started to learn culture from our parents. But it doesn't just stop there. We also learn culture from our family, friends, schools, churches, and other social institutions. The culture that our siblings also learn is something that we can also acquire. All right. So, again, it started first with our parents and then influences by our siblings and then with our friends when we go out with them and engage with them, and also schools when we go to school, like here in Trinity University of Asia. So we go in a Christian school. So we tend to actually acquire and learn the culture of a Christian school. And also in our churches, so if you're engaged in a church group, a youth group, or anything, and then also in a social institution. So if you're engaged in a, like, for example, a club, or for others, healthy fraternities or sororities. But I'm not saying that you should actually attend those, but this is just an example, okay? So some of us actually acquire, learn, and also pass on this culture to others from our family, friends, school, churches, and other social institutions. Okay, again, culture is something that is learned and transmitted. So there are three important concepts that you need to understand to learn more about culture. First is enculturation, followed by acculturation, and deculturation. So enculturation is actually the process of learning one's own culture. Again, it is learning one's own culture. So, like for example, is the culture of our parents. This is now the culture of our family. So it is learning your own culture. That's enculturation. Okay? And then the next one is acculturation. Acculturation is the process of learning another culture. Again, it is the learning of another culture. For you to easily remember this is that you can memorize it like this. Acculturation starts with letter A, and another culture starts with also with another A. So that's easier for you to understand and remember. So that's acculturation, another culture. So it's in simple terms, this is the culture where you will learn another culture. Like for example, you came from a different school. Excuse me. For example, you came from a public school, and then you tend to transfer to a private school. So the culture of the public school is actually different to the culture of a private school. So what you're going to do is you have to learn it. The process of that learning is now called acculturation. Again, acculturation is another culture. And lastly is deculturation. Deculturation is unlearning of one's own culture. Again, deculturation, unlearning. Okay, so like what I've mentioned in my previous class, we can learn and unlearn the cultures that we wanted to keep or not. So in here, deculturation is you're going to unlearn some of the culture or maybe all of it. Okay, so you're going to unlearn some of the culture that you have. Okay, maybe you grew up with it and you wanted to not do it again or not do it anyway. So that's called the deculturation. Again, culture has three important concepts. Again, that's enculturation, acculturation, and deculturation. Okay, so culture is closely related to symbolic behavior. So what does that mean? So communication is the primary means one's learns. Okay, so like what I've mentioned a while ago, that's why communication is very important. It's because sometimes in language as well, is that because it will show how you respect, acknowledge one's culture. So for you also to learn that culture, you have to communicate. You cannot just simply watch something and then assume that you're already learning it. Okay, so like what I've mentioned in my previous class, communication is actually a process. It's actually a transactional process, something that goes both ways. You have to give. When you give, you have to take something for you to learn. So it comes with give and take. All right. So again, communication is a primary tool for you to learn one culture. Okay. So for example, for you to learn more about psychology, you have to actually engage in psychological seminars where there's an interaction between you and other people for you to learn, uh, other professional people that you where you can learn psychology. All right. So again, um, culture is culture can be learned through communication. All right. Also, culture is created and changed through communication. So some culture are created, and however, some culture are changed through communication. So again, we can learn and unlearn some culture, and it also can be changed, okay, through communication. So some of you might agree with it. For example, a couple wanted to change something with their relationship, they will agree on that and then they will change it. Okay, so you need also communication with that. Okay, so again, culture is closely related to symbolic behavior. So again, it requires a communication wherein there's a give and take. Okay, so like what I've mentioned a while ago, is that culture is change can be changed rather. It can change or stays the same, or we wanted it to remain. Okay, so culture is something that we can adjust depending on the situation. So we have, because of that, we have the two important concepts to describe culture change or culture yes, culture change. Okay, so we have the invention or innovation. Okay, so invention or innovation is someone within a culture derives or creates a new artifact, like a cell phone, a new behavioral practice like text messaging someone, or a new idea like communism, which in turn changes the culture. So like for example in our family, okay, for example in our family in per se, is that in our family most of our parents doesn't know much about technology. But when smartphone came, of course there will be hesitations whether they would buy it because they think that it will break easily because you're actually just touching the screen instead of typing on a keypad. Okay, so since us our generation, their children actually is getting involved with the new trend of social media and also with the new technology, we tend to derive a new technology in our family. So now all of us are actually using it, and we actually started to watch movies in our devices rather than actually watching on the television. And also we communicate now in social media rather than actually calling each other when we are away from each other. Okay, and also in our house, actually our house is just simple and small, but since there's already a Facebook Messenger, we just tend to chat each other and ask them, or just call them like, hey, it's already dinner time, come in here. So we just call each other that way, instead of going to their rooms and actually tell them that it's already dinner time. Now we are actually just texting or chatting each other in social media, just like that. So as you can see, invention or innovation is actually something that can be learned in our culture. Something that is new within the society as well can influence the social unit in our society, which is the family and its culture. Also, we have this concept, diffusion and hybridity. Diffusion is actually the spread of artifacts, behaviors, and ideas across a group or culture, or between groups or culture. So in here, it is actually the spread of something that has just arrived. Like for example, um, like just for example in our family, okay, like in our family, um, my mom initially started Netflix. Okay, so she started Netflix, watching Netflix, until us, their children, realized how efficient to have Netflix. So after a month or two, when she started watching, we actually started to enroll ourselves to Netflix, subscribe to it, and then we started watching Netflix as well in our social medias, or I mean in our smartphones. So as you can see, the fusion in simple terms is actually the spread of an artifact of behavior and ideas across a group or culture. So in other aspects as well, for example, in a group of friends, when a group member of that friendship started to watch K-pop, suddenly two or three more people in that group will also be influenced with K-pop. Some may not, but um, that process of spreading is actually called diffusion. And then we also have the concept hybridity. Hybridity is actually a notion that describes cultural blending between two cultures in contact. Hybridity, from its root word, hybrid, is actually a combination of two cultures together in one. So, for example, just like in our parents, our mom and our dad, or just simple a couple who decided to get married, actually came from two different cultures, because they, of course, they belong to a different family and different organizations and different locations in the Philippines. So um, when these two people decided to tie the knot and get married, they actually practice hybridity, because they belong to different cultures, and then they decided to stay one because of marriage. Okay, so that concept is called hybridity. Okay, that's just one. Also, we also have, let's have another example. In a classroom, there are K-pop fans, there are OPM fans, and many more. Okay, so this differences in genres in music that they wanted actually coexists this yes coexists with each other. So this they decided to actually to remain as classmates, but however they have different cultures. So in simple terms, it is a crossing between two cultures. It is actually the blending and going with it, while there are two or more cultures. I mean, two cultures rather. Two cultures exist. All right, so culture exists at different interlocking levels. So actually, there are different levels. Okay, so like for example, my example a while ago was family. There's actually a different level, and then many more. Okay, so they're actually a level. There are different levels and culture. All right, so now let's go to it one by one. So we have first is the macro regional. Excuse me. Macro regional is actually culture that is in large areas of the world that share cultural similarities, like Southeast Asia, Latin America, or the Middle East. So macro culture, the word macro is actually big, so it consists on the cultures within large areas. Like in this example, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Middle East. So it came from, actually sometimes is yes, from the different, because we have in Asia, we have the Southeast Asian, and then other parts of Asia, right? So in here, in simple terms, it consists of large areas. Okay, large areas wherein they have similar cultures. Okay, and then we also have regional or national. So in here it comes from the root word national. It means nations or small clusters of nations. So in here, it's smaller because you're going to identify cultures from different region. Like here in our country, region 1 is different from the culture of region 4. Okay, so it depends on what region you are. Okay, so that's, I think, is one of the simplest explanation for the regional or national. All right, so again, macro regional, this is bigger than the national, because the macro regional consists of where you at in a specific in the world. Okay, so Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Middle East rather, and then regional or national is where you are in that country. For example, here in the Philippines, where at what region you are. Okay, so sometimes, believe it or not, we belong in the same country, but we still have different regions. Especially here in the Philippines, we are actually spread. We have different islands. We are in a different islands. We live in different islands rather. So each islands also consists of different cultures. Okay. Okay. So we also have another concept called co-cultural. In co-cultural, these are groups that share a space together, sharing some aspect of a dominant culture and a mixing or blending their cultures to a greater or lesser degree. So in co-cultural, in here, we have two or more cultures where there is a greater or a dominant culture than the others. So in here, it doesn't have or it doesn't exist in a side by side, but it actually exists in a greater or lesser degree. Okay, so like for example, in my previous lesson is that in US there exists European American, Latin American, Native American, and Asian American. In there, you can see that there are different ratios of different Americans, right? So those Americans actually have or came from different uh, places as well, Europe, Asia, and the ones that actually stays there are Native American. So in that aspect, you can see that there are actually dominant culture. So maybe since European American is greater in number in America, it means, or in US per se, is that it must have, or the culture there must have a dominant European American culture. Okay, so again, co-cultural is actually a group of people coming from different countries or different cultures, and then they share the same space wherein there would be a greater or a dominant culture. Okay, so we also have organizational and also family. Family is the one that I keep on or the examples that I've given a while ago. So that's the family culture. All right. So we also have organizational. So in organizational, this is what I keep on mentioning a while ago, is that this culture is from different organizations around us. For example, Jollibee has a different organizational culture than in McDonald's, or maybe they have the same. Or a better example would be Jollibee would be having a different culture than ones with, like for example, Manhan, because Manhan is actually a restaurant, while Jollibee is a fast food chain. So from there, you can see that these organizations are different and they have different cultures as well. So organizational culture actually is depends on the companies, schools that you belong in. Like my example a while ago was you're a clinician, and then also if you go to another school, there will be a different culture. And then clubs, societies, and organization. Again, family, that will be your family or your clan or your angkan. That's it. All right, so culture also changes depending on its environment. Okay, so the environment where you belong in, whether it's social, political that you've believed in, and even the physical environment impacts your culture. Like for example, in the Philippines, we used to take a bath every day, every single day. I mean, people around us would notice if you haven't taken a bath yet because we have this culture that we believe that bathing is an essential for everyday living. It is actually an essential for your hygiene every day. However, if you go in another country where there is snow and also there is the rainy season is very often, bathing is actually happens whenever it needs to be bathed. Well, in other country, let me have an example. I believe in correct me if I'm wrong, okay? I believe in Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi. My apologies if I am not wrong. Please just correct me if I'm wrong. Excuse me. Like for example, there, actually, you will only take a bath whenever you will have sex. Okay, so I'm not saying that I'm right. Okay, please do correct me if I'm wrong. I've never been in Abu Dhabi or in Saudi Arabia. I just read that, and also I've just watched documentary about it, but I'm not certain that it's actually the majority. Okay, but as you can see, in simple terms, is that bathing actually happens depending on the culture, or in this society, or the weather, or the climate rather, that you belong in. Okay, so again, your culture depends on your environment as well. Okay, the physical environment, and also the culture. Your culture also depends on the political views that you believe in. Okay, so let me just clarify this. Okay, so a lot of people, assuming that personality, when you started, or you believe, or you casted a vote for a certain politician, you will be that politician. So actually, that's a misconception. Okay, that's in simple terms, in logic, that's actually illogical, because the specific cannot be universal, and the universal cannot be specific. I mean, the specific cannot be the universal, and then but the universal can be specific. Okay, so that's actually a different aspect. That's logic. But going back, okay, so when you have a political view that's different to other people, that doesn't mean that the political view of that person is actually their personality. That's actually wrong, and it's wrong to assume as psychology majors and those who study psychology. That's actually wrong to assume, because voting behavior is actually different to your personality. Okay, so but however, your voting behavior can also influence your culture. Again, different or political views can do affect your culture. However, it may or may not affect directly your personality, because again, we have voting behavior, and that's different. Okay, all right, so that's again, culture does change in social, political, and physical. All right, so people may act differently from culture, but that does not mean that culture is not there. Again, we came from different places, we came from different backgrounds, and with that different backgrounds, we do have different cultures. So um, sometimes our culture differs from others. Sometimes it may be offensive to them, and their culture may be offensive to us. But culture actually exists anywhere. It doesn't mean that their culture is different to ours. It means that it's wrong, and also it's not there. Okay, or we cannot we will say na they don't have any culture. Okay, because there are some people keeps on saying na wala namang kultura yan. Okay, so or it's actually a judgmental statement that someone has no culture because their culture is just different to yours. Okay, so there we all have different culture, and it may or may not agree with us, but we all have due culture. It's just it's different. All right, so we also have concepts that we need to take remember, or we need to remember. We have subculture and also counterculture. The subculture is a cultural group within a larger culture, often having beliefs or interests at variance with those of the larger culture. So we have like what I mentioned a while ago, we do have dominant culture, and we also have those less dominant culture. Okay, so those who that does not belong to the dominant culture can be classified as subculture, because it is just actually within within in a group where there is a dominant culture. Okay, so again, we are composed of different people from different cultures. That's why there could be a dominant and a less dominant, or a lesser culture. Okay, the lesser one would be the subculture. In simple terms, subculture is a culture within a larger culture. Okay, the next concept we have here is the counterculture. Counterculture is a culture whose values and norms of a behavior differ from those of mainstream, often in opposition to mainstream cultural mores. Okay, so we have a culture that's actually opposing to the dominant ones, or the culture opposing to a specific culture. So this culture is actually counterculture. Okay, so it's actually it may oppose completely or slightly, but the common line here is that it is counteracting the ones that is dominant or known. Okay, in simple terms, counter, opposite, counter culture, opposite culture. Okay, it's the different one that is it's different to the dominant one. All right, so this is the last part, or the last slide for this discussion. So we also have the aspects of culture are interrelated. So if one aspect of a culture changes, that will impact the other aspect of the culture. So as you can see, cultures are actually related to each other. So especially if that culture, let's go first to one culture. One culture, if one aspect of that culture changes, the rest will follow. Okay, so like for example, in my case, in our family, my example a while ago was that every one of us actually don't know smartphones yet, especially my parents. But when one of us purchased a smartphone, it influenced my other members of our family, and then everyone actually started using smartphones. So as you can see there, there's actually an addition, a new kind of culture wherein we finally started to use smartphones. That's why the other aspect of the culture wherein you use TVs or you use small old radios before is that it's no longer existent because of the new culture that is inserted in our culture. That's why every one of us now already uses smartphones instead of using radios and televisions. So as you can see, one aspect is changed while just using a simple smartphone can actually diminish the other parts or behavior of that culture. All right. So again, culture is actually interrelated. One changes, the other follows. All right. So that's it for this lesson. So if you do have questions, please just do let me know. We do have group chats, so please just do type there your questions. Okay. So thank you very much, and then I'll be seeing you on our next synchronous session rather. Thank you. Bye for now.